Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Bittner. I am a digital sports producer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and this is the live post-game show with Paul Zeise, a sports columnist for the Post-Gazette, after the Steelers pick up a win by the skin of their teeth Sunday afternoon against the Atlanta Falcons. Paul, it was ugly today, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they got the win though. That's really the most important thing. They won. You kind of knew it was going to be an ugly game from the standpoint of, the Falcons aren't very good. The Steelers aren't very good. You got two, not so good teams playing against each other. Generally, you're going to end up in the position where they're at right now. And so, the big thing is they won. I think that's really what you take away from this game. They won. That would have been a disastrous loss. I think that they got some really, really big help from the referees at the end of the game. Of course, we never talk about that when the calls benefit the Steelers, but I thought Arthur Marlette was a textbook interference in the end zone on the play, right? So, but they won, and that's all you can really ask of them is to win games that are in front of them.
If you're just joining us for the first time on YouTube, please pop a like on this video. Help us out with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any of our content coming at you this week. We'll have, I believe, Chris Carter and Ray Fittipaldo on the Monday North Shore Drive episode. We're going to have some Pirates talk this week after the big Brian Reynolds trade request, maybe some Penguins talk. So make sure you're tuned into all of that by hitting the subscribe button. And, of course, $6 for 6 months of access. That promo deal is down in the description. That'll get you the rest of football season. That'll get you into spring training, maybe even, close to the NFL draft at this point. So make sure you're subscribed both to the channel and to the Post-Gazette. And if you have any comments you'd like to add, we'll be monitoring the chat. If you have any questions, anything you want to throw out there, please feel free to weigh in the chat, either on YouTube or Facebook. We'll get to as many questions as we can. Paul, my first question for you, I guess, kind of starts with the inability to finish drives today, because I think especially in that first half, there was some clear momentum. They were driving down the field, but they just weren't finishing. I think that's 2 weeks in a row we've seen that now. Really, we've seen it all season, but this was the continuation of, I think, a 2-week trend where there were some good things happening, but you couldn't finish it off. What's your read on all of that?
I mean, that's the thing. You got to finish drives a little better than they finished today. Some of it was drop. There was at least one drop that finished the drive off that made them force, a field goal. The quarterback was inaccurate a couple times down there in the red zone. They didn't get enough a push for a running play or two down in the red zone. I mean, it wasn't just one thing that was causing them to stall. There were a number of things, but you've got to be able to punch a few of those in at least for touchdowns. And if you do that, then really, you're not in need of a bailout, basically call, what I would call a bailout call in the end zone where they don't call pass interference. It's not relevant because you're up by enough points where even if they score a touchdown there, you win the game. So at the end of the day, the Steelers, they did what they had to do to win. And of course, if we'd have said, a couple of weeks ago, if we'd have told you that Matthew Wright was going to be the hero of a game, everyone would have said you're crazy after watching his first couple of kicks. But obviously, he's settled in, and he's probably earned a contract for next year somewhere. I'm thinking, he's probably kicking well enough that some team will pick him up when Boswell comes back. So that's that. I mean, more power to the Steelers. The best part about it is their kicker has made kicks today. It'd be interesting if he'd have missed a couple of those, maybe one or two of those early ones, if they would have kept going back to him or started going for it on 4th and down. You can go and kick the ball when you know that your kicker is going to make them. So really the difference in the game here was the one field goal by him. And so you just got to, continue to try and get better in the red zone and finishing drives. A couple of those drives didn't even make it to the red zone, actually. They were longer field goals. But I think that what we've seen from this offense is there are some really good elements to it, but it's got to get better. And it's got to get a little more I mean, it's still very, very vanilla. I mean, the play to Connor Hayward, people were going crazy about what a great call that was. And yeah, it was schemed up really well. We don't see nearly enough of that. And that's part of the problem. So if you think about it, the Steelers had 2 field goals in the second half. That's all they did offensively. So, they've got to get better.
Yeah, and speaking of the kicking game today, got to give a shout out to Presley Harvin for that final punt too, because I think that really put the nail in the coffin for the Falcons. So a good day for the kicking game. We gave Danny Smith and special teams a hard time on the show last week, but credit where it's due. They got the job done this week. Paul, speaking in terms of Matt Canada's future, I know this is a hot button topic. Can he save his job with days like today when they're winning? They're looking better. They're winning games, but they're still, it's still painful to watch at times. I tweeted, this was hard. This was a hard game for me to pay attention to.
Yeah.
I was bored to tears.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, that's the whole point. Like, if they get better, though, and they keep getting better, if it looks like at the end of the year, say the last 2 or 3 games, they're really clicking and we see, them finishing drives and they're playing well and Kenny Pickett continues to progress. My question is, why would you fire Matt Canada? I mean, forget about last year and earlier this year. If he's getting better and they're finally starting to figure it out and there's some good things that are happening and him and Kenny Pickett, are developing a good working relationship, exactly what is the argument to fire him other than you don't like him? Like, why would you start over again when you finally got the offense to where, to the point where you add a couple more pieces and they should be pretty good? I'm not saying that's where we're at now, but I think people want to write these stories way too early in the season before actually everything plays out. If they get better, if they win a bunch of games down the stretch, if the offense continues to look more and more competent, I'm not sure why you would want to start over again.
Yeah, I think that's the ideal. I think for me, if the season ended today, I would say you got to get someone else. But and there's still time, and he can change, my opinion of that. But when you're not doing those things we're talking about in terms of finishing drives and stuff, I just wonder, because you got more games like this on the schedule. You got the Raiders, you've got the Browns. They can win some of these games, and I think still not look great doing it. They can look like they did last year when they didn't look great doing it. So, my curiosity to see is yes, can they start finishing those drives? Can they start doing those things for him to save his job? The one drive that I thought looked really good, the one difference maker was that Pat Freiermuth explosive play, 57-yard catch. I think I think they said on the broadcast it was the longest of the season. I think that's another element that I want to touch on here is, yes, there's the design of the offense that I think is not designed to be explosive enough. But then, you also wonder, given how Deontay Johnson played today, given how George Pickens played today, are these weapons playing up to the level they have to do to make those kinds of explosive plays consistently, to not have to have 16-play field goal drives, be what makes the difference in a game for you?
Well, that play by Pat Freiermuth was a simple, was it like about a 6-yard throw? I mean, and he was wide open and he turned around, and after that, it was all 100% on him. So I guess to your point, yeah, we haven't seen enough of that, but that one was a superhero effort. I mean, it should have been, an 8-yard reception or something, and he wouldn't go down. There aren't a lot of explosive plays in this offense. It's trying to explain it to people. It's almost like it's designed for 16-yard drives, which is okay when you're, getting first downs and whatnot. But when you're not, it's really ugly. The other part of it is it's a lot like, like that Falcons offense. I mean, it's brutal, right? When they got the holding call down near the goal line, they might as well kick the field goal then, because they're not getting 20 yards. The Steelers are in some ways, they actually have a little bit more explosion than that. But anything that sets them behind the sticks, it's going to be okay. Now this is a grind to try and get 15 yards or 20 yards to get a first down, because that's just not how they're built. That's the biggest thing I would tell you when it comes to all of this stuff. In the NFL, it's too hard to score going the hard way all the time, and you need your guys to make big plays. I'll tell you one of the biggest plays in the game which I thought was another one where the referees, or in this case, the people in New York, gave the Steelers a huge break, was the Diontae Johnson fumble. I mean, I've been watching football a long, long time. If that's not a catch and a fumble, I don't know what a catch and a fumble is. But that, to me, that play right there, and that was a huge play too. I mean, that was a big swing with respect to field position. And to be honest, if I were the Falcons, as bad as your offense is, I didn't understand why once it was overturned they didn't take the 15-yard penalty and make it 3rd and 24, and then hope you can get off the field. I mean, that's an extra 15 yards for a team that needs 15 yards. And as it turned out, if you get those 15 yards, guess what? You score a touchdown. The drive doesn't end on the 10. I mean, obviously things play out a little differently, but you understand what I'm saying. To me, I think that that was a huge play. But again, you need your skill position players to make big plays. It's the other thing is it's amazing how much better the offense looks when they can run the ball. I mean, I know that's like an old school, mentality of, you got to run the ball to, pass to score, run to win or whatever. But I really believe, especially if you don't have one of the big time quarterbacks, it's really, really hard to win if you can't make teams respect your running game. If you can't make teams understand that you can run it for 4, 5, 6 yards anytime you want, it's hard to get it done that way.
Yeah, and there's been I do want to get into the running game a little bit because Chipper in the chat has a question about that, but I also want to touch on these receivers a little bit quick before we do that. Number one, I thought it was a brutal day for Diontae Johnson. Ton of targets, didn't catch many of them, had that fumble. And I thought you saw some encouraging signs Monday night from him, some signs of life that maybe this connection with Kenny Pickett can work. But today, I think you fell right back into the same, where he's just kind of a guy out there. And he's not the guy you're paying, $40 million to or whatever it is. What's your assessment of where he is right now? And is he dangerously close to falling into the Chase Claypool trap of, enormous disappointment?
I think he's already there. I mean, he's a guy who, to me, is never going to be a star. Everyone wants to keep making him a star. He's just not going to be a star. Certain guys, you can just tell they don't have whatever it is in their DNA, the fabric of, they just don't have it within themselves to be a superstar for whatever reason. And in him, he's just missing that it factor. With him, there's always something. It's a fumble. It's a drop. It's a this. It's a that. He'll have a game where he shows some of his talent. People get all goofy, and then what happens? He can't play anymore. The next game he can't play. I mean, he's a guy who's just not that good, and we keep trying to make him better than he is.
Yeah, and I think you're starting to see that, especially without Ben Roethlisberger and his knowledge of where the ball needs to get to, and I think their games played well together last year. What the things Roethlisberger had left in the tank paired well with the things that Diontae Johnson does well, and that's how you get a 100 reception year. But I don't know if that's necessarily true of Kenny Pickett, and I think that's what we're seeing. Still, you can't fumble that play, or put the team at risk in that. That could have lost them the game, and it got overturned. But I think you and I agree, probably shouldn't have. So that's pretty rough. I also wanted to ask about George Pickens because he very clearly on the CBS broadcast was saying, "Give me the ball, give me the ball," with cussing some people out on the sideline. What do you make of that, one way or the other?
Well, he's a guy, he wants the ball, obviously. I mean, that's what he is. I mean, that's how he is. And, these younger guys, that's how they, some of them are built. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, he's open a lot. He's been open, and they're not getting him the ball. Some of it's probably Kenny Pickett not seeing him. Some of it is Kenny Pickett having, the instruction from the sideline that, hey, get the ball out quick, don't take sacks, don't take bad, that's the big thing to me. And that's where I look at it and basically say he's a young guy, he's a little bit immature, he'll keep growing, but I like the fact that he wants the ball. I like the fact that he wants to make plays. That's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think the Steelers need some of that fire on the field right now. I mean, I haven't seen a ton of that kind of stuff this season, even though I think there'd be plenty of reason for it. And we've seen much we've seen much better Steelers offenses have more fireworks on the sideline. Thinking back, not just to the Antonio Brown days, but there were some other personalities on those teams that they wanted the ball, and there was a lot of talk about it. And I think it was a good thing to see that fire. I know maturity was one of the big questions about George Pickens coming out of the draft, and that's kind of maybe why he fell to the Steelers. So there's a little bit of a red flag there for me, but I think it's a net positive that someone on that offense is mad, right? And that even when they're getting better, and even when they're winning, he wants more. So I'll chalk it up to that. Finally, we'll move on to the running game. Chipper's question is, was the run game better because of the offensive line today, or because the Falcons are just bad?
The run game, I think, has been good the last couple of weeks. The Falcons are bad, but my point is that I think that the Steelers' offensive line has played better. I think they've gotten better and better and better. And you know what? They're coming off the ball. They're creating holes for the running backs. Running backs are getting hit, 3 yards down the field instead of, in their backfield and all the other stuff. I mean, that's just reality. They're getting better.
Yeah, and I think that was reflected in the stats this week. I ended up doing the Tomlin Tuesday press conference story as our guys were coming back from Indianapolis last week, and I was pretty shocked to learn that even going into this week, the Steelers are rushing for more yards this year than they have at any point since 2011, and that includes the Le'Veon Bell years. When he was a true bell cow and a difference maker for this offense. So, Paul, how close are you to really trusting that this running game is here to stay and not just, a run of 3 or 4 weeks where maybe you catch some defensive coordinators napping on tape or something?
I don't know. I mean, again, I think did you find it interesting that it took to the second half that the Falcons, a running team, figured out that maybe we could run the ball? Did you find that interesting? Like, why do I don't understand these offensive coordinators. You have a terrible quarterback and you run the ball well, and the Steelers are not a good run defense. Why did it take until the third quarter when you're down 10 points or whatever they were already down? I don't understand sometimes. I think that, next week, obviously, I don't know what his status is going to be, but if Lamar Jackson's hurt, I'm assuming that the Steelers are going to get a real big dose of running the football from the Ravens. And even if Lamar Jackson is healthy, they'll probably get some, of him running the football, running the football. I mean, they got to figure out how to stop it. And to me, when the Falcons ran right at the Steelers couldn't stop them. I mean, that's really what happened. I tell you, they went right down the field. And then, of course, like I said, when you're a running team with a bad quarterback, you get a holding call, it's over. The drive is over for the most part. I mean, the Steelers, you know what I mean? The Steelers couldn't stop them. And so, and the thing is, that hold probably didn't change the play. If he would have just released his hand like half a second earlier, that hold isn't called. It's still a touchdown. So my point is, the Steelers' run defense is bad, and I think that if the Ravens come in here without Lamar Jackson, they're going to try and run the ball right at the Steelers as much as they can.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely what you would expect from them, because it was rough to watch there down the stretch. Because yes, I mean, Atlanta is a pretty good running team, and they're not a good team overall, but that's one thing that they can do well. And I was shocked like you that we didn't see it earlier, but I think that was something the Colts ran into last week where they tried to get a little too cute in the first half, and you would have thought Atlanta might have learned from that and watched the game, but apparently not. Anyway, we got a question from Lee in the chat here. Do you think after the big plays Pat Freiermuth had today, we will see him getting more targets down the stretch here?
Well, I mean, I think that's the natural progression of the offense, right? It's not even so much about what they're going to draw up, but I think that what happens is you start to understand that he's one of your reliable targets, right? And you scheme in a way that he's going to be open. So, I would hope he gets more targets, and I hope they throw it to him more, because he is one of the guys that actually, is going to catch it and might actually do something with it once he catches it. And you know what? Right now, the Steelers don't have guys like that. Deontay Johnson is way too inconsistent. George Pickens has been a little bit too much feast or famine for me. right? The other guys are all just sort of what I would call, ham and eggers, Sims or Gunner or whoever the hell else you want to put out there. So, yeah, you would think that he would be the guy who probably not just would get more targets, but would be the most targeted, guy they have.
Yeah, and I think that big play today did speak to his potential. I think it's just a question of, are you going to call enough things in the middle of the field, and that's been a question we've had about this offense all year. Jaylen Warren was back in the lineup today. What did you think of how he played? Alongside Najee Harris.
I mean, he does what he does. That's the thing about it. There's nothing really all that special about him other than, he's going to get tough yards. He's going to get downhill. He's going to find a hole and, plug away. That's what he is. That's who he is. He's a guy that, to me, I think, you get what you get out of him. And I don't have a problem with him, and I think, again, his presence and Benny Snell's presence, to me, have created a little bit of a sense of urgency, it seems like, for Najee Harris, because he's run a lot harder the last few weeks than he had. And so, I think competition is always a good thing for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And low blow from James Lofton of CBS asking if Jaylen Warren looked at people's kneecaps to decide where to run because he can't see over the offensive line. I was like, wow, that was a stray that was completely unnecessary. But all right, I guess CBS was doing that today. So a strange comment that I just wanted to call some attention to. What did you think of the Falcons today? I think you and I every week have this conversation about, did the other team tell us anything about the Steelers today? I'm going to file Atlanta in the bin of no, and maybe they're the worst one yet.
How did they win 5 games? That's what I would love to know. And that division they're in is dreadful. I mean, the Steelers really, all of the AFC North teams really benefit from getting to play 4 of those teams and from that division, because that division, those teams are terrible. And that, I think the Bucs are playing Carolina tonight or today right now, I think, and the winners or the Saints, I think, maybe even.
I think it's Saints on Monday night.
In first place, I think. Whoever wins that game will be in first place. If the Saints win, they'll be in first place at 5-8 or whatever, I think, or whatever it is. I'm just saying that division's terrible. But the Falcons, to me, I mean, I guess Andy Dalton was really, really horrific. But Mariota, to me, is so bad. I can't understand how in the NFL you can't find a better player than that to be your quarterback. And I mean this in all sincerity. If the Falcons had Mason Rudolph, they'd be better. I'm not saying that Mason Rudolph's great, but he can at least complete a forward pass. This guy, he runs it a little bit, whatever, but their passing game is non-existent because he might hit it. Here's the thing. How many throws today, Adam? How many throws did he hit a guy in stride on time so the guy could catch it and run after the catch? I mean, even the ones he completed were high, were low. Guys had to go down to one knee to get them. They had to, stretch out to get them. They had to turn around and try and catch them from behind. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I can't think of one time where he dropped back, threw it on time, threw it to a receiver who caught it in stride and was able to really do something with it. Almost every single one of his throws was high or low or outside or inside. I can't. If I had to watch the Falcons, if we had to do this video watching the Falcons every week, I honestly think that I'd be an alcoholic, or maybe more of an alcoholic than some people think I might already be. I don't know. I'm just saying, if I had to watch that team all the time, I would have to drink to get through a game because that guy is terrible.
Well, does that give you hope a little bit about Kenny Pickett's development? That I think he's I think he's ahead of where Marcus Mariota was today, and Marcus Mariota has a ton of gray hair. He's an old guy in the league at this point, and he's still holding down a job for a team that I guess is hypothetically still in the playoff hunt. I mean, just because of the nature of that division.
Exactly. Kenny Pickett, put it this way: he's better than Andy Dalton. He's better than Marcus Mariota. He's better than whatever the mess is that's going to start at the Texans from week to week. I actually think right now he's better than Russell Wilson. But, that probably speaks a lot more to those guys than it does to Kenny Pickett, because all I'm saying basically is that Kenny Pickett's competent. Those guys are terrible. They're not even competent. That's the thing that and then coming up they've got either Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield or God bless him, my favorite Temple guy, PJ Walker.
Yeah. So we haven't really talked about Kenny today. What did you think of how he played? Was it another step forward for you? Were the issues that the passing game had somewhat on the receiver? What was your assessment of how he played and whether this carried the torch forward a little bit?
Yeah, I mean he did well. I mean he did what they asked him to do. He didn't turn it over. That's a big thing, right? Start there. Okay, if he had one turnover in this game and it was in their end or something, it probably would have been the difference between them winning and losing. So don't beat us. His first job. Don't beat us, and he didn't beat them. So that's number one. Number two, make enough plays to give your team a chance to score, and he did that. He made enough plays to put them in position to score. He missed some throws. I don't know that he'll ever be this super, really highly accurate, big time down the field throwing guy. But he's the guy that runs your offense and gets you where you need to get to. If they play good defense, or in this case, play against a bad offense, right, and they're able to keep them off the board, Kenny Pickett is fine. He's getting better, and he's making some more plays, and I think he's smarter, and I think he's doing a lot of different things that are going to give him a chance to win games.
Paul, is it fair to look at the Ravens game this week as like maybe the test? Because I think before the Cincinnati game, coming out of the bye, we looked at that Saints game and it was like a quiz, right? Quizzes and tests when you're in high school. And the Steelers have been doing a good job of passing these quizzes, but they failed the test against Cincinnati. Do you think, is that how we should be looking at this game against the Ravens this week, where you at least want to see enough good things that even if you lose, you can feel good about the progress that's being made?
Well, I mean, it depends. If Lamar Jackson doesn't play and you got Tyler Huntley, you got to win that game at home. I don't care.
Well, that's true. That's true. I forgot about the injury for a second.
Yeah, Tyler Huntley's another bad player. I mean, there's a lot of bad players in this league, period. I hate to say it like that, all right? But, Adam, if you give me 1 minute here or 30 seconds, can I just get this off my chest? This league is awful right now. It's so hard to watch so many of these teams. There's so many games on Monday Night Football and Sunday Night Football and Thursday Night Football I have no interest in watching because the teams are bad or they've got bad quarterbacks. I don't understand how the league can be as bad as it is right now. If Kansas City's on, I'll watch it. If the Chargers are on, you know what? I'll watch it. You know why? Because there's a good chance they'll score a lot of points and then find a way to choke at the end and lose, right? But at least the game will be entertaining, right? The Bengals, they're getting more entertaining now that they're getting healthy, I guess. I mean, there's so many teams in this league I have no interest in watching. I can't understand it. I can't understand how many there's so many bad quarterbacks. I mean, go through you do an exercise, Adam. Go through the league, and look at the number of quarterbacks that you would say, you know what, that's a guy I really would want to watch play. Okay. You go through the AFC East, you've got Tua and Josh Allen, right? I have no interest in watching Mike White or Joe Flacco or whoever the hell else is there. What's the other guy's name? Zach Wilson. I have no interest in watching Mac Jones or Gabby Barrett or whatever the hell the backups are, Bailey Zappi or whatever the hell his name is. I have no desire to watch those guys, right? I just don't. You look at the AFC South, I don't know if there's any of those guys I want to watch, right? You look at the NFC East. I mean, Daniel Jones is what he is. Tyler Heineke, whatever. I mean, look at these guys. These are all starters. I'm just telling you. I had to get that off my chest. This league is really hard to watch right now.
Well, and I think that's maybe one of the reasons you have some optimism about the Steelers, right? Is that, maybe it doesn't take that much to break out and kind of get back to that range you were in last year of a fringe playoff team, and then maybe you can carry the ball a little bit further forward. And I think that's where the resiliency of the Steelers franchise shows, because the Steelers don't go through years like this very often where they're in that category of unwatchable teams, right? And that's because they had Ben Roethlisberger and all that, but organizationally speaking, they've done a good job of not being in this range where we have to compare Kenny Pickett to this guy or that guy, and really you're just comparing a bunch of things that aren't good enough. I think that's a reason for optimism. Didn't think we'd get a Gabby Barrett reference on today's episode.
I couldn't think of his name. Bailey Zappi or whatever his name is.
Yeah, yeah.
That guy. I mean,
Gabby Barrett is the country singer from Munhall, I believe.
Yes. It just, I knew it was some kind of name, like, I don't know, whatever. It just, I tell you that the other thing is, just real quickly, looking around the division, the Browns won today. No thanks to Deshaun Watson, I guess, but you know what? They stay locked, in stride with the Steelers as well. And of course, they have the tiebreaker. I'm sure people in Cleveland are saying, well, you know what? Of course, if you get what they get, 2 defensive and a special teams touchdown, if you get that every week, obviously you're going to win a lot of games. But my point is, people say, hey, you know what? We won the game without him playing well. Now he's got a game of rust knocked off of him a little bit. Let's go into next week and see if he can start to play better. And you know what? If we're able to make some plays again with our defense, then now all of a sudden they'll be 6-7, and then you start dreaming about bigger things. I mean, the Steelers are 5-7 right now. You look at their schedule, and you think to yourself, well, you know what? They've got an opportunity maybe to do something and get to a point where they want to get to. But there's a lot of other teams. The math is still not in their favor.
Yeah, I think the big problem for the Steelers right now is the volume of the Jets.
Right.
Do we think that the Steelers are dramatically worse than the Jets? Probably not. And could they compete with them if they were on an equal playing field down the stretch? Maybe, but they're not because they lost all those games early in the season. Where it's just going to be difficult for them to get to. I've heard people talking about 10 wins not being enough, and so I think that's probably the most difficult part for the Steelers is even if you win these last 5 games. That may not be enough to get into the playoffs just because of the hole you dug yourselves. I'll get you out of here on this, Paul. Did you have an opinion on the Steelers being fined $130,000 for the throwing the ball up in the air and doing that celebration?
I mean, believe me, I get it. I get the sensitivity, but to me, it's a silly fine. Seriously. There's far more egregious things that I see going on the football field, and to me, if you're going to find them for that, how about can we get rid of all of these? Let's all run to the end zone and take a picture and all the other choreographed nonsensical things that go on afterwards. They threw it up. It is what it is. I'm so tired of this world where everyone has to be ultra sensitive about every damn thing. It is what it is. I think you kind of knew where I was going to stand on that one, which is it's just dumb.
That's my job, Paul. I'm here to set you up.
Okay, well, I appreciate that.
Well, that's all I think we have for today, everyone. Thank you for stopping by. Good audience today. Good questions. Like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. Ray Fittipaldo, Christopher Carter for the North Shore Drive. I'll be talking, I believe, with Jason Mackey later in the week, like I said, about the Brian Reynolds trade request. Do you have any opinions on that, Paul, before we go?
The Brian Reynolds, well, if they trade him, then you know what? There's no reason for us to watch this season. I mean, because they're not going to get it. They're not going to get somebody back that's better than Brian Reynolds who can help them win. So, you know what? Let's go to December of 2023 and see if we can try again.
Yes, so we will have talk about that. Probably some college football as well. A couple really great bowl bids, I think, for Pitt and Penn State. Pitt got really lucky getting UCLA in the Sun Bowl. I think that's going to be a great game to watch. Good offense versus a good defense. And Penn State's going to Pasadena, and you can never complain about that, right, Paul?
No, I mean, yeah. All the things that needed to happen for Penn State to get to the Rose Bowl happened, and that was, it's probably a good reward for a 10-win season, right? As for Pitt, they stayed out of that ridiculous Yankee Stadium game or whatever the hell it's called, and they stayed out of having to play against somebody like Iowa. This is actually a game that might be interesting to watch. UCLA has got a pretty good offense, so it actually could be a fun game to watch for a change, although we know Pitt's recent history in the Sun Bowl suggests that it's going to be a really ugly, terrible game. We'll see.
The good news is they can only go up, right? They can only go. I think I listened to you that day on the radio after that game. That was some of the best work you've ever done.
The 3-0 game or the game they lost, what was it, 13-12 or whatever it was against Stanford? Both of them were terrible.
They were pretty bad. But yeah, we're good. Lots to talk about this week. So make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll talk to you all again next week after the game against Baltimore.
All right. We'll see you guys.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.